I'm going to draw on the next several questions from your book, The Campbell Plan. You bring up the Paleo Diet. Why isn't it appropriate to draw parallels between the diet of our ancient caveman or Paleolithic man and the foods that we should be eating today?
Well, what are the foods of our ancient, the Paleolithic man? We can just start with that. What did they eat? That is more complicated and less certain, I think, than many people realize. I mean, people think that they can watch some movie about cave people or something, and they have some sense that they were hunting, woolly mammoths, and they were eating the meat, and like they were carnivores essentially. And there's certainly a lot of evidence that survived that early humans did eat meat, of course, hunting tools and so forth. But what we don't know is how much plants exactly they were eating, how much of their diet was plants. And there's some evidence that I think that probably a larger portion of their diet than we realize may have been plants. I mean, plants are pretty easily harvested in many parts of the world that have a good climate, that are available year-round. And we can now look at some of the recent research looking at dental analysis, and you can see starch granules that have been preserved in the dental enamel. And these starch granules actually prove that these early humans, as far back as 100,000 years, farther back, were consuming starch. We were consuming starch. And you can look at the analysis of some of the enzyme systems in our body, amylase, for example, and that's related to digestion of starch. When did we get the ability to digest starch? And you can form a pretty compelling argument that we've been consuming plants for a long time. It's been a bigger part of our diet than we'd like to think. And, if you go back millions of years, of course, and assuming you believe in evolution, we evolved from very likely from species that were eating almost exclusively a diet based on plants. So there's all sorts of uncertainty there. And then you apply a paleo diet to modern America, and what do most people do? They cut out all starchy foods, they cut out beans, they cut out grains, they cut out dairy, and they're left with what? They're left with meat. Okay, and I don't think that's what our paleo ancestors were likely eating. It's just these engorging themselves on meat 3 times a day. And you look at the health benefits of that and health risks of that, and I think it's quite a dangerous way to go.
In your book, I found it interesting that we think of the food pyramid, the USDA food pyramid, and you sort of boil it down even further into 3 food groups. Can you sort of explain that and present that to us? Yeah,
we have this weird idea and weird pattern in nutrition of, I shouldn't say we, but the status quo in nutrition has been really to discuss nutrition in terms of nutrients and isolated chemicals and so forth and antioxidants. I like to keep things way simpler. I like to think about whole foods and groups of foods because that's easy to understand. And so I have 3 food groups. One is whole, unrefined plant foods. Those are things you'd find in the supermarket, in the grocery store, farmer's market, fruits, things you'd find in the tree, vegetables, root vegetables, all these things. The second food group is animal foods. That's very easy to understand as well. Anything from or of an animal, meat, dairy, and eggs. The third group, and this is a very, very important one, is processed plant foods or plant fragments. So fragments of what nature provided. The 3 biggest offenders in that group are oils, sugars, and white flours. And if you look at most Americans' diets, we have a lot of focus on vegetarian, vegan, eating a lot of meat. It's always sort of plant versus animal kind of discussion. But as I've looked at so many people's food diaries and I've so many patients, I think the processed plant group is really just a massive problem. And people are eating a lot of processed foods. And that's a big part of this. So it's a plant-based diet, but as we always say, it's not just plant-based, it's whole food plant-based.